With YouTube, it's of course Survive and Prophecy, and I'm back again with another reaction video, and we're going to react to how the Lakers collapsed after they won. They three-peated, obviously. So without further ado, let's get into this. If I can find this. Oh, okay, found it.
5 years after he lost his.
Now, I'll tell you this before I start, and I won't pause it again. The Lakers three-peat was something that we'll probably never see again. I know, this Lakers team is trying to repeat with AD and James and now Drummond. You know, now LeBron James have two legitimate big men. Which is a problem because I mean, Drummond and AD is not shot creators. They're not gonna create they're not gonna create their own shot. Dennis Schröder is not Rondo. I mean, it's hard when you have two big men like that. You know what I'm saying? Because we all know that they're going to be starters. Drummond is probably going to play at the five, and AD's could probably play at the four. And, so I think having two legitimate big men helps. But when it comes to crunch time, when you need that, when you need that shot, I'm not saying that they can't shoot because they're still big men. But in the playoffs, that's when, they can just take those away from you. You know what I'm saying? And then you're going to have to count on LeBron James so much that, you're not going to have any spacing when it comes to, just throwing it down low and stuff. Because, when the playoff comes, they play very tight defense. They don't play loosely defense, but they play very tight defense. Like they don't allow anything easy. So that's why I say that this Lakers team was something special to watch because they had a lot of shooters around Kobe and Shaq. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so let's see how this all folded and why they failed to four-peat. I mean, obviously, and this whole thing about Kobe and Shaq's beef, that was just all media hype and talk. You know what I'm saying? Kobe liked Shaq and Shaq liked Kobe. Like there was no, I mean, yeah, at sometimes they'll, get in each other's way and, try to push each other to be great, but it wasn't like on that level like what the media is trying to, misconstrued and stuff. So yeah, so let's check it out.
5 years after he lost his championship co-star, Kobe Bryant silenced doubters by winning it all without
Yeah,
Shaq
he won it without Shaq
twice.
too.
Kobe earned his
That's the
first
one
Finals
thing.
MVP in
Oh, can he win the
2009
championship
as the
without
Lakers
Shaq?
took
And then
down
he won it
Dwight
in
Howard and the
2009
Orlando
against
Magic in
Boston.
5 games. That was also Coach Phil Jackson's 10th championship, pushing him ahead of Red Auerbach's record. And while Kobe had become LA's undisputed star, he did have a strong veteran supporting cast built by GM Mitch Kupchak. Clever Spanish big man Pau Gasol, stout point guard Derek Fisher, and the savvy, adaptable Lamar Odom. That cast only improved following the '09 championship. Young center Andrew Bynum still had knee problems, but had better luck fighting through them. And newcomer Ron Artest provided the boost LA needed to roll back to the finals in 2010 and exact revenge against the Boston Celtics, who'd beaten them in '08. Now with 2 Finals MVP trophies to go with his 2 Shaqless championship trophies, Kobe's on-court legacy was secure, but not necessarily done. Bryant had just signed an extension to stay in purple and gold well into his 30s. What would that final chapter of his glorious career look like? Would he find continued success with the same group? Would he recruit stars to form a new super team? Would he bring LA even more championship banners before saying goodbye? Well,
I really like this collapse thing. They do it with
after a title
almost
repeat,
every
the
team.
first order of business was Phil Jackson's future. The 65-year-old coach had pondered going back into
It really goes into
but
details.
decided to stick around one more season because a prophecy told him that was the right thing to do. Cool.
So he said that I got a message from on the high that said, Phil, you've got to come back. There is a need to fulfill the prophecy.
The second order of business was Kobe's health. Bryant had been bothered by soreness in his shooting hand and in his surgically repaired right knee all season. And in July, he got another operation on the knee. The championship hangover was real. Kobe rarely practiced with the team in an attempt to preserve his knee. Gasol felt the weight of big minutes, and Odom was extra fatigued because of a summer spent with Team USA. This all bred frustration, which boiled over at times, like when the Lakers suffered an embarrassing Christmas Day loss to the Heat and Kobe called out his teammates. Nevertheless, LA won 57 games, same as the prior season, and marched into the playoffs a 2 seed. They handled their business in the first round, eliminating New Orleans in what would be Chris Paul's final games as a Hornet. The second round didn't go so hot. The Lakers blew leads in games 1 and 3 against the Mavericks and got blown out in game 4. The closest they came to putting up a fight was occasionally attacking J.J. Barea.
Oh yeah, that
Despite ending the
shit,
season
man, that
with
shit
the
was
playoff
nasty.
sweep, the first of his coaching career, Phil
I think
followed
Andrew
through on his
Bynum was
promise
a
to
dirty
retire.
player.
In retiring, Jackson shed some light on LA's unique front office. The man who'd been a Lakers fixture for most of the decade said he had minimal relationship with management and didn't expect them to consult him going forward. Jackson was not referring to Lakers GM Mitch Kupchak. He was talking about members of the Buss family, longtime franchise owner Jerry Buss and his children, several of whom had significant executive roles. Jim Buss was in charge of basketball operations. Jeannie Buss
That's why I said that you can never let your kids run your company, boy. I mean, I'm not saying that they're doing a terrible job, but I mean it's family, so I mean.
was in charge of the business side, and to add another wrinkle was Phil's girlfriend. So yeah, these people who each felt very differently about the departing, extremely successful coach now had to replace him. Kobe had expressed approval for longtime Jackson assistant Brian Shaw, but Kupchak and the Busses made a point of not consulting players on the decision. They passed over all the in-house candidates for a newcomer, Mike Brown, the coach who'd worn out his welcome with LeBron and the Cavs. Kobe maybe wasn't thrilled with that hire, but he had to be excited when, following the 2011 NBA lockout, the Lakers agreed to a monumental trade. Kobe would lose his best 2 co-stars, with Gasol going to the Rockets and Odom to the Hornets, but he'd gain the best young point guard in the NBA and probably his best co-star since Shaq, Chris Paul. Just one problem. The NBA technically had control of the Hornets franchise, and after lots of whining from other teams, Commissioner David Stern vetoed the trade for what he called basketball reasons. While Paul ended up in a different LA jersey, the Lakers had to figure out how to handle 2 important players who were now pretty bummed that their employer had tried to dump them. Odom was upset enough that LA considered the bridge burnt and hurried to find a new home for him. They traded the reigning 6th man of the year to Dallas for just a protected first-round draft pick. Despite losing Odom, LA's first season under Mike Brown was pretty uneventful on the court. Kobe, Powell, and Bynum all played well. The Lakers made the playoffs as a 3 seed and won a tough first round against the Nuggets. But they once again fell in the second round to the eventual Western champ. This time, it was the mighty OKC Thunder. Perhaps more important long-term was LA's work off the court, like at the 2012 trade deadline. They didn't like their point guard situation after the Paul trade fell through, so they sent Fisher and a first-round draft pick away for big man Jordan Hill, then traded more picks to bring in promising young point guard Ramon Sessions. Sessions wasn't that good in LA, and he left in free agency that summer. So that was a bunch of assets, including multiple first-round draft picks dealt for
Poor
very little.
moves, man.
This was the same season in which Lakers management came under fire from Kobe for their treatment of Gasol. They came under further fire for Jim Buss's wild, careless shuffling of the staff around Kupchak, his attempts to completely scrub the team of Phil's fingerprints. And remember, that was his sister's boyfriend. CBS's Ken Berger called the Lakers a steaming pool of nepotism and nincompoops. Well, the steaming pool was about to have a pretty
When they
big
got
soak.
Steve
In
Nash.
July, the Lakers acquired aging star point guard Steve Nash, losing a few more draft picks in the process. In August, a long-rumored move finally went down. A massive 4-team trade.
And then that's when they
among
got
other
Dwight
things,
Howard,
sent
and
Bynum to Philadelphia
that team was
and brought
just
the Lakers
atrocious.
Dwight Howard, a superstar center with an expiring contract. Forget the future. With a 38-year-old point guard and a soon-to-be free agent center, the Lakers were going for it immediately. Basketball experts were thrilled, and SI put LA on their season preview cover, promising fun. Well, Howard missed a lot of camp and preseason recovering from back surgery. That's not fun. The brittle Nash fractured his leg in his second game. Not fun. Brown's attempts at installing a Princeton offense were eclipsed by how badly the Lakers defended to open the season. Jim Buss wondered aloud if Brown's system was flawed, then fired him after just 5 games, necessitating a hasty midseason hire. Not fun. Jeannie Buss assumed the Lakers would bring her pal Phil out of retirement, but Jim stunned and, in her eyes, betrayed Jeannie by going with another star coach, LA's former rival, Mike D'Antoni. Without the benefit of a training camp to get familiar, D'Antoni struggled to run his own system on the fly. Players missed time with injuries, egos clashed, and the awkwardness of the Howard-Gasol pairing led to Powell's occasional benching, which only led to more egos clashing. And speaking of which,
And you see how Dwight Howard and Kobe Bryant never
complicated when
coexist.
their father, Jerry,
I think
passed
Kobe
away in
was
February
just one of those
2013 at
type
the
of
age
dudes
80.
that,
Man,
you
none
know,
of this is fun.
was going to bring the
When
hammer
the
on
Lakers
you.
finally began to turn it around after the All-Star break, Kobe
Because anybody can get along with LeBron James because he's likable, you know.
but promptly got swept by the
But Kobe has
LA's
that,
first
you know,
opening round
killer,
exit since 2007.
work ethic that
Entering the
was just
summer
too much
with
for
no
Dwight.
first-round draft picks and minimal space to build, the Lakers prepared to run it back. D'Antoni would get to coach a season from its beginning, and when Kobe got healthy, maybe the Lakers could coalesce and improve internally. One issue. Howard was a free agent, and he hadn't exactly loved his season with D'Antoni and Kobe. The Lakers could offer Dwight more money than anyone else could, and did what they could to woo him back, but Howard bailed, signing with the Houston Rockets. The Lakers knew they were boned. LA legend Magic Johnson, communicating via Bill Simmons' Twitter account for some reason, was already looking ahead to the summer of 2014 when they'd have some cap space. LA waived their 2010 Finals hero, who'd since changed his name to Metta World Peace. Metta responded as only Metta can. The Lakers made some minor signings, Swaggy P among them, and otherwise buckled down for a season that started okay but got super rough when Kobe messed up his knee like a week after returning from the Achilles stuff. That injury and many more sunk LA to 27-55, their worst record yet. Those 27 wins included a game in which the Lakers were so depleted by injuries that Chris Kaman had enough room to treat the bench like a bed. The 55 losses included a 48-point defeat to the Clippers, who, with Paul, had taken over as LA's superior team. It was a year-long embarrassment, and crucially, D'Antoni and Gasol still didn't get along. In the offseason, both of them left. Besides falling into a lottery pick, the primary lasting impact of that dismal 2013-2014 season was that despite his declining health and inclining age, the last player standing from those championship teams would be a significant part of the future. Weeks before his season-ending knee injury, Kobe had signed a 2-year contract extension. The Buss family once again felt pressure to build quickly around their aging legend. Pressure only complicated by the fact that Jeannie had taken a bigger role since her father's death and had publicly expressed her displeasure with Jim. Jim knew that he and the GM, Kupchak, needed to turn things around, and he publicly raised the stakes of not doing so. He said if he didn't bring the Lakers back to contention in the next 3 or 4 years, he'd leave. So, onward. With their 7th pick in the 2014 draft, the Lakers snagged burly, versatile Kentucky forward Julius Randle. With that cap space Magic had been so excited about, the Lakers pursued a number
And
of
even
big
Julius
names.
didn't even
Here was the
pan
best
out.
chance for
But
busting
but
up
look at
Jack to
him
fix
now
the
on the
Lakers'
Knicks.
back.
He's
They wanted free
he's
agent
really
LeBron
doing
James,
something.
but he chose to return home to Cleveland. They wanted to trade for Kevin Love, but he ended up with LeBron. They met with free agent Carmelo Anthony,
But
but
he
he
signed with the
eventually
Knicks.
decided to return to the Knicks. So the Lakers did what they could in the open market, making Jeremy Lin and Carlos Boozer their foremost offseason acquisitions. They hired former Laker Byron Scott to coach the team and entered the season with a roster of Kobe, whatever remained of Nash, a potential future star in Randall, and a bunch of weirdos and youngsters. Then Randall broke his leg in his first ever NBA game. Then a struggling Kobe needed shoulder surgery. Then Nash, who hadn't played all season, retired.
Lakers are just
Scott's Lakers
cursed.
started the season losing
Jesus
and never
Christ, I've
looked
never
back.
seen a
They
cursed team
outdid the
before in
prior
my
year's
life.
record with a franchise worst 61 losses. So it would be another offseason with a
And
lottery
then that's when they drafted
which LA
D'Lo.
used on Ohio State point guard D'Angelo Russell. And once again,
He didn't
the
even
Lakers
pan
aspired to add
out.
some big names. LA badly wanted a new front court of LaMarcus Aldridge and DeAndre Jordan, however difficult that might be to assemble. They brought out the big guns to recruit Aldridge. Yes, that's Adam Levine wearing a backward custom jersey. But Aldridge really just wanted to play for a winner, and the Lakers weren't that. Not anymore. Jordan had his own whole thing going on, but suffice it to say he didn't join the Lakers. Once again, LA had to scramble for alternatives and ended up with an offseason haul of Roy Hibbert, Lou Williams, and Brandon Bass. Yet again, Byron Scott was left to coach a roster of old Kobe, young newcomers, and a bunch of weirdos. Yet again, it went terribly, and this time, after a 2-13 start, Kobe announced he wasn't going to extend his contract again. It was time to retire. That 2015-2016 season would produce Kobe's preposterous final game, and in spite of that, yet another rock-bottom record for the Lakers, 17-65. Kobe's farewell meant one important thing. The Lakers didn't have to mess around with ambitious short-term pursuits anymore. They could rebuild for real. Losing and youth and space begat more losing and youth and space, which begat after
And then they
years of
traded all
failing to
those
attract
pieces
stars,
for
a couple
AD.
huge additions. None of that, however, happened quickly
But you
or
know what?
convincingly enough
It
to
turned
make
out to
people
be
forget the
perfect because
promise
they won
Jim
a
Buss had made in
championship, right?
2014 to make the Lakers a contender in just a few years. Jeannie certainly didn't forget, and in 2017, she fired Kupchak, accepted the resignation of her older brother, and moved forward with a management group of Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka before that too fell apart. The group of people hoping to lead LA out of the lottery has minimal overlap with the group of people who got them there in the first place. So what happened to the Lakers during Kobe's final chapter? Well, first the West caught up to them. They wisely tried to trade their old championship core for a new one, but that got shot down in a way that generated hurt feelings and desperate moves. And while Kobe stuck around, his health deteriorated and a very messy front office whiffed on attempts to attract sidekicks for him. Kobe's departure didn't fix that messiness, but it did allow for an organic rebuild, which allowed for a dramatic one. The time in between was pretty grim, but the first peak was probably worth the valley, and Lakers fans hope more peaks lie ahead. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to know more about the Lakers right after they traded Shaq, I recommend this Rewinder episode. If you're just here to watch big market NBA franchises fall apart, I can tell you about the time my favorite team did that.
Shout out to Sports Nation though. But yeah, man. I mean, to be honest with you, man, I mean, the Lakers could have gone two ways. You know, they could have either rebuilt around Shaq or they could have either built around Kobe. You know, if they build around Shaq, then I mean, I don't know. Who knows who would have? I mean, who knows what would have happened if they did choose to, obviously build around a big man. But those days were just over. You know what I'm saying? But they just failed to put pieces around Kobe. You know, the same way that they did for LeBron James, they should have done the same thing for Kobe. You know what I'm saying? Give him another big skill man. You know what I'm saying? But they failed to do that. But it is what it is, though. Like, comment, subscribe, and till next time, take care of yourself and each other. And the video will be in the description box down below if you want to check it out.